Hi, everyone. This is Commissioner Winston Barnes in the city of Miramar in the southwest corner of Broward County in the state of Florida. Welcome you all to our every now and again discussion. This time we're talking about stroke awareness, May being the Stroke Awareness Month that is observed across this country. It is of major significance, especially when one looks at the demographics of the city of Miramar, especially in the historic section. What we've been able to do is to grab two very, very busy people to come and talk with us. And what I'd like to do as we start is have them introduce themselves. We'll have ladies first. Carol Hilton, talk a little
Good,
bit about yourself before.
good evening, Winston. My name is Carol Hilton. I am the president and the founder of Smiley's Voice Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As a matter of fact, we're the only stroke awareness foundation in South Florida. This organization was founded in 2010 after my husband and I lost our son, Michael Hilton Jr., known to many as DJ Smiley. He passed away from a stroke in November of 2009. At that time, many people thought that was an old people's disease. So hence we decided to form that foundation to spread the awareness of stroke, its impact, prevention, and treatment for community. So I'll have Dr. Ajiboye introduce himself as well. Can't hear you. You muted.
Yeah, we might as well share with our viewers that Dr. Ajiboye is very busy. He's actually on shift. And what we're hoping to do is to grab him from time to time during this presentation, and he can share with us. But Carl, let's start until he's available. I mean, listen,
Okay.
this doesn't have to be formal and that structured. Let's grab him when we can.
Okay.
I think we're
Hello,
fortunate to have him sharing with us. That sounds
uh,
like him.
Dr.
Yes.
Ajiboye.
Okay,
Yes.
Doc, why don't you if you can put us on camera and tell our listeners a little bit about your background.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm in the ER right now, so I'll just. Can you guys see me?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Ajiboye. I'm a
Yeah.
neuroendovascular surgeon, currently busy working here at Memorial, got ready for an emergency case. I did my training at Thomas Jefferson and also at Texas Stroke Institute in Dallas. And what I do is I take care of people of all age group, as young as age 2 all the way to age 104. I did a thrombectomy 3 months ago on a 104-year-old lady that's very, very functional. So I help manage patients with stroke, usually the interventional part when they have clots in the brain. And I also help manage patients with aneurysms if they have abnormal blood vessels in the brain. And that's one thing I enjoy doing the best to also educate the community about the risk factors, the ones that are modifiable and the ones that are not modifiable. We'll certainly go through that today. And in addition to educating the community, also I enjoy educating the EMS crew, the folks that get them to us, and we let them know what signs and symptoms to look out for. Because one thing that's key with regards to stroke is that time is brain. The quicker you can get to us, that will mean the difference between recovery, disability, and possibly death. So this is something I enjoy doing, and I look forward to talking to you. And thanks, Commissioner Barnes and Carol Hilton, for inviting me. And look forward to talking to the community of Miramar.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Okay, Carl, let's hold on to him as long as we can
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
before a patient grabs him. Okay,
Yes.
we talk about time. Tell us why time is so important when there's a suspected case of stroke.
Okay, so I'm just gonna sit down here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
So
can.
the thing with stroke is just think of the vessels in the body as channels. You know, the heart pumps blood to the brain, And the brain is one, I mean, all the organs are important, but the brain is one of the most important. And the reason is that controls a lot of function in terms of your thinking ability. It controls a lot of all the other parts of the body as well. And what does the brain need in order to function properly? It needs the nutrients, it needs the oxygen. And that's something that the blood vessels get up to the brain. So if you have a stroke, broadly speaking, there are two types of stroke. There's the hemorrhagic, in which there's a rupture of a blood vessel. That's only about 15%. And then there's the ischemic, which is when there's a blockade in the blood vessel supplying blood to the brain. So think of a pipe carrying water. If there's a blockade or there's a lot of rust or there's a lot of plaque within that blood vessel or within that pipe, then there's not good water getting distally into where they're supposed to go. So what happens is when you have a blockade in the blood vessel and there's not nutrients and there's not oxygen going to where they're supposed to go in the brain, that part of the brain starts dying. The brain is one of the most unforgiving parts of the body, in which when it doesn't get its blood supply and when it does not get its nutrients, and it starts dying within a few minutes. And every minute that passes, about 1.9 million brain cells die. And when those brain cells die, they become irreversibly damaged. You're not getting that recovery back. So that's why it's important that time is brain. And when we say time is brain, that means that every minute that passes, your stroke is getting bigger. And as the stroke gets bigger, it gets it makes it harder. It makes it harder to be able to treat that patient, because then the treatment is not going to be as functional. It would not be as helpful. It won't be successful. And then the patient will end up having a larger disability.
But one of the things you mentioned, and I think it is so apropos that we talk about it in this context, being a
Hello,
municipality.
you gonna use this?
You talked earlier, Doc, about your training of EMS staff. Talk about why that is so important these days.
So if we realize that time is brain, then that means that the people that will be coming in contact with that person first are very, very important. They are almost like the rate limiting steps. So what we do is we educate the community, not and also educate the EMS. So it's really, really important. Before I talk on EMS, it's really, really important that the family members, our community, know how to identify stroke. There's an acronym called FAST. It is very, very common. F for facial weakness. A for if there's any arm or leg weakness. S if the speech is slurred or different. T, time to call 911. So that family member, they're the most important step. Not myself, not the EMS, not anyone else. If they don't activate that EMS, then the person is not getting to the hospital. So the first thing is educate the community in fast. Then the second thing is we go out to the community and go with the EMS. We've been to the Miramar EMS and we talk to
Great.
them, educate them in terms of how to identify the signs of a stroke that makes us think there might be a large vessel occlusion, a stroke that if you can act within a few hours, patients can have remarkable outcomes. So we go there, we educate them. Usually every other month, Dr. Meta and myself will train them on the exam to look for. And the fascinating thing with a memorial is once we educate them, then what happens is when that EMS gets to that facility or to that house,
They know what to do.
they know the questions to ask. And
Okay.
we just don't stop there. Once they ask those questions and they determine, oh, this is really looks bad, they already call us before they even get to the hospital. They call us from the field saying, hey, there's an EMS stroke alert. We concern this. They tell us all the details. And then we are already getting the cath lab ready. The ER is ready. We already activate. Everyone has to be within if it's nighttime, everyone will be in the hospital within 30 minutes. So it's a parallel workflow process, which everything is working in tandem, so that by the time the patient gets to us, we are fired up
Already.
and ready to go. So that's why that educating the community about fast is important, and educating EMS in terms of how to identify certain kinds of stroke that are amenable to treatment, and then they call us from the field. So we don't stop where they call us from the field. The third thing we do is we actually give them feedback. We'll send to them the identified images of what the vessel looked like before and what the vessel looked like after we open it up, and tell them how appreciative we are of their efforts. because without them doing what they do, we cannot do what we do. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and it's an appreciative relationship where we educate them and we give them feedback.
Incredible. Just to remind those who might be viewing us on Facebook Live at this moment, you may join the chat and forward your questions to us, and we'll have either Dr. or Carol answer those questions. One of the things, Carol, that we've spoken about in fact, the last session we had on radio, we talked about the fact that these are realities that are specific to segments of our community. But the one thing that I think, if you remember, my major takeaway the last time we chatted is that EMS and the community are being trained to understand what we're talking about.
Absolutely, Winston, because that was our issue in 2009, that our son was taken to the closest hospital. And that's when we realized that not all hospitals are created equal. Meaning
Right.
that, if you're having a stroke or if you had a stroke and the thought process, the protocols, I should say, at that point was take the person to the closest hospital.
Right.
That may not be the right center. So that's why part of the education that we've been educating our community about is choosing the right center, advocating. And with Dr. Mehta and his team, Dr. Ajiboye, actually educating the emergency management services, we have seen major progress because now they know to take that patient to a comprehensive stroke center such as Memorial Regional, Memorial West, where the patient can get the appropriate treatment to really get a better outcome, achieve a better outcome. Other than that, you could actually be in a facility that they cannot do any of these cutting edge treatments, and therefore the outcome is not good.
Therein is the incredible advances that, Carl, you and I have seen happen over the last 10 or so years that we've been talking.
Absolutely.
Because, as you say, the idea is to get this patient to the nearest hospital as quickly as possible, when that might actually be counterproductive.
Exactly. So educating our community about where are the comprehensive stroke centers, the Joint Commission stroke centers that can actually do all the treatment that may be required for that patient, getting that patient to those centers and being a voice, advocating, because you may have someone that says, hey, yeah, let's go down to the closest hospital. But you can say, I want to take my loved one here. If it takes an extra 5 minutes, it's still saving a life or saving brain cells to get to the appropriate center. So that is so important that we.
In addition,
Mhm.
in addition, oh, and Dr. Diaboy is with us again. Listen,
Yep.
one of the incredible things that we've discovered, Carolyn, talking with yourself and Dr. Mehta recently, is that the hospitals have now included certain modalities that didn't exist before. Talk a little bit
Exactly.
about that.
Exactly. Norman, are you going to answer that one, or are
I'm
you
sorry,
there?
what's the question? I can hear. What's the
The
question?
treatment modalities that now can be used to treat.
That just never existed recently. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the treatment modalities up until like in the 1990s, what we used to do was mostly just certain medications called aspirin Plavix. We still use that, but then the FDA approved back in like in the early to mid 1990s a medication called IVTPA. That is a medication that you have to get within a certain amount of time, within 4.5 hours. That's why, we always say time is brain, and you also have to get the patient to us in a timely fashion. That medication has the ability to dissolve the clot, right? But all strokes are not created equal. So there are certain strokes, the ones that I usually end up having to take to the cath lab are usually large vessel occlusions, and those do not respond well to TPA. So the new technique over the last 5-10 years that has revolutionized our field of neuroendovascular surgery is called a thrombectomy. With that,
Yes,
it's
sir.
just like plumbing. It's like plumbing. We go, just like a plumber will come in and put the rotor in the pipe. We go in from either the leg or the arm, get into the channels of the body, the blood vessels, and get our catheters and wires deep into the vessels in the brain, and we ensnare the clot with a stent retriever, and we also hook it up to an aspiration tubing and literally pull it out from the brain out through the leg or through the arm. So that's the procedure that has revolutionized stroke care. The thing is this: you want to do that within a certain time. We give it up
Right.
to 24 hours, but they're not created equal. If someone comes in at the 23rd hour and I'm doing that procedure, they probably won't do as well as someone that comes in like the third or fourth or fifth hour, right? Because the person that you're doing at 23rd hour already has a large stroke and they're likely to bleed in that area. So that procedure is quite important, and it has better outcomes if you do it earlier.
Yeah.
Let me just insert this here. One of the things that is evident, Carol, and I think you are this person who have found these incredible professionals, there is an enthusiasm in Dr. Ajiboye as well as Dr. Mehta to do the work they do. This is a really special blessing.
It
You,
is
you can hear the
absolute.
enthusiasm. It's so incredible. Thank you,
And
Doc.
we are we are so blessed as an organization and as a community to
Yeah.
have physicians such as Dr. Mehta, such as Dr. Ajiboye. I have never met Dr. Ajiboye. Okay, we actually had a telephone introduction by way of Dr. Mehta, and
Oh
he
my
is
gosh.
I called him and I called him and he says, well, I said, Dr. Jiba, am I pronouncing your name right? He says, call me Norman. You know? So we had such a wonderful conversation, and his thinking is so in line with what is
What
needed in the
you've been trying to,
community.
yes, 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 yes.
I mean, I got off the phone with him and I was so impressed, and I started telling everybody about him as well. But you're right. He's very passionate about what he does
Yeah.
and the positive impact that he's made in the community. And so is Dr. Mehta. So I can call at any time, day or night, and I get a response. That's amazing. You really don't get that from many physicians, I must say.
Yeah.
You know what? If I can follow up on that, there's so on Mother's Day, there was a news article on Channel 7 that talked about the a 42-year-old lady that survived a stroke and lived to tell it because of her 10-year-old son. You guys
Wow.
can like maybe Google that later. It's Linda. I mean, it was on the news, Channel 7 on Mother's Day about 2 Sundays ago. That story encapsulates why I'm always excited. This is a lady, she's 42, African
Yeah.
American lady. She was on the phone at about 9 o'clock at night. And on the phone, she started talking gibberish. Her arm fell to the ground and then she fell down. And the 10-year-old son started saying, Mommy, Mommy, and realized that the mom was having a stroke. And he went and called the neighbor and they activated 911. I was on call that night. She came in paralyzed. She couldn't walk. She
Wow.
came in on the stretcher. And then we found out that she had a large vessel occlusion in the brain at 42. She recently had a COVID infection, and we took out the clot, and she had a defect in her neck in the carotid. We placed the stent, and 3 days later, she walked out of the hospital intact.
Wow.
That's
So,
amazing.
so the story was, she gave her son life, and the son gave it back to her. Because if the
Oh
son did
my
not act,
gosh.
if the son did not act quickly, she would have died from a big, massive stroke. The son acted quickly. The EMS, I think it was Pembroke Pine EMS, they acted quickly and got to her. They called us while they were in her house saying that, oh, this young lady is having a large stroke. I already set up the team to get the team ready. By the time she got to us, we were already getting ready. We were able to get to her quickly. We took her the stroke. Literally, while she was on the table, when we were done, she was already asking, "Oh, what's going on?" She's lifting her right side. She was doing better. That is what excites me. I mean, not every case goes
Wow.
perfect, but a
Right.
lot of them, more than 80%, go well, and that's what makes me happy. And that's why you kind of hear that enthusiasm in my voice, and also in the voice of
There you
Meta as
go.
well.
There you go. There you go. And what I like about this story as well, we're talking about a 10-year-old who recognized the signs were not good signs.
Right. Yep.
So
And that's why education is key.
exactly.
Anyone could do it. Now you can be young, as long as you notice something is different. Just tell a neighbor or someone, or call 911 and get them to the hospital pretty quickly.
I'm sorry, Doc, but this just means more work for you and people like Dr. Mehta. It means you guys have to start coming to our schools. That's what that means.
And I was just going to say that because
Yeah,
that's what we do. We do that as
yeah,
well. We go to the
yeah.
Good.
community centers, we've gone to schools, and we've educated young children, high school, middle schools as well. So, and we need to do more of that. So, we have been doing that. So, small organizations can make impact. And I think we have done so through and with doctors again, like Dr. Mehta, Dr. Jiboye, Dr. Clinton Jules is another one I can call at any time. He's right there with me, with us, with the
Okay.
education.
Let us talk a little bit then about pre-stroke. Talk about lifestyle problems, lifestyle challenges, and what we can do to better prepare ourselves for even when a stroke does come, it's not a massive one. Talk about lifestyle and the need for changes.
Okay. Do you want me to start off with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know right now we've painted a picture of stroke being very, very bad, and it's true, it's very, very bad. But if there's any silver lining in the sky, if there's any good news I can bring, it's that 80% of these strokes are preventable. 80% of them are preventable. And when I start talking or thinking about, how the fact that they're preventable, I categorize them into two categories. There is the modifiable, the ones that you have control over, and then there's the unmodifiable, the ones that you have no control over. The ones you have no control over are your age. As you get older, you're likely to have more clogged pipes, so you're likely to have strokes. Also, usually males are usually at higher risk of stroke up until the age of 60. And then after that, the ladies catch up and then they become higher as they get into menopause. Genetic history, if there's a family history of a first degree relative, you can't choose your family. That's also um, non modifiable. But even within that 80% that's preventable, a significant portion of them are modifiable. You have control over that. So think again about that pipe that's delivering water, about the rust developing. What are the things that cause rust or plaques to develop in our blood vessels? These are things like high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, poor diet. These are things that are common in the African American society due to the diet. So if you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes or cholesterol, you need to make sure that you regularly see a physician and you have them, take a look at your blood pressure, measure your hemoglobin A1C, and also check your LDL, which is a measure of your cholesterol, and have them treated appropriately. Things you can do to help control those are exercise. The American Heart Association and Stroke Association recommends 30 minutes of moderate to intense exercise each day, usually 5 days a week. It doesn't have to be 7 days, 5 days a week. Eating a healthy diet. Typically, I recommend to my patients and to my loved ones Mediterranean diet, rich in vegetables and fruits and nuts, and trying to minimize any processed food, and then also staying away from salt as much as possible. So if there's any good news here, it's 80% of strokes are preventable, and a significant portion of the risk factors you have control over.
Wow.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, Dr. Jiboye, that after the age of 65, then we see that the incidence in women increase.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and when we first started this foundation, we weren't even aware that twice as many women die from strokes than breast cancer,
Yeah.
and that's still the same. And
Mm.
there's high incidence of death in black women versus any other ethnic group. That's correct?
Yes, you're correct. And I mean, if you want to get into the theory, they usually say it's maybe the estrogen is initially protective, and as people get into menopause and there's no more estrogen, then the androgens, the other steroids, the other hormones become higher, and what increases the risk of strokes in men basically outweighs the estrogen now in women, and then it's higher risk of stroke in women after menopause, especially in the African American women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I harken back to my conversations for more than 20 years with gynecologist Dr. Winston Alexis. One of the things I want Dr. Ajiboye to remind us is that, okay, we keep hearing about estrogen and we make the connection specifically only with women, but men carry some of that around in their bodies as well.
You're right. So yeah, men carry some of that, but it's not in a significant proportion as women.
Right.
It's very low, and that's why before menopause, it's higher in men because the androgens, the testosterone, increase your risk of stroke. So yes, but you're right. I think the proportion, the fact that we don't have enough. So if you have a gentleman that has a significant amount of estrogen, the risk of stroke theoretically might be lower.
Okay. One of the things I want us to really highlight before we're actually halfway through already. This is how good this discussion has been. Is how important it is for the public. And Carl, you remember me saying this, and I say to other doctors as well. One of the things that I find very painful is to see at the time of the day I go to work, you see people in the parks, and from a distance you can tell this is a stroke victim. And you kind of want our people to do something about this before it gets to that stage. And I think part of what has happened is that, especially us who are immigrants, we come to this country and we go by the old dictum that says, work hard and you'll be okay. But we're not taking care of ourselves enough. Talk a little, both of you, what kind of impact you think this has had on lifestyle, the whole matter of the pandemic. Are we taking better care of ourselves, or are we still missing the boat? Oh, Carol, I see that look. We're not.
Oh, I definitely think we're missing the boat. That,
Oh,
the pandemic really put extra stressors on many people. The
okay.
stress level has increased markedly. And I think most people remain pretty sedentary, and a lot of weight gain over that year. So the pandemic did not help our situation at all. And Dr. Jiboy, I'm pretty sure that you have seen probably an increase, or what have you seen in the hospitals during this
So,
pandemic in terms of?
so I agree with you. I think the pandemic certainly exposed the disparity in health, both in sort of the disease pathology and also in the treatment. Uh, it- but also during this pandemic, people have become sedentary. People, and also there's also depression. There's also stresses,
Doesn't help,
things
right?
things that increase your risk of stroke because they cause what we call a catecholamine surge. This chemicals in the body that can cause your vessels to spasm and get tighter. So certainly, I think and also during the pandemic, people were not coming into the hospital when they're having stroke symptoms. So I remember during the pandemic, we saw a lot more patients come late to the hospital already with evolved stroke that you can't do anything about.
Because
So
they
I
were
think
afraid.
yeah, because they were afraid of catching COVID in the
Yeah.
hospital. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest education is just people should try and stay healthy, work, exercise, don't be sedentary. I know, there's a lot of issues going on with the pandemic that affects how people make choices. But if there's anything, I think we should always value human, relationships, and that's been hard in social isolation. So, things are getting better now. So hopefully people can start getting out and making sure they're putting on their mask, but also start interacting with people. That will help reduce your level of stress. And also start working out or exercising and eating healthy. And let's hopefully put this pandemic behind us.
Okay, both of you guys, Dr. Jiboye and Carol, I want you to reintroduce yourself to those who might have joined us late. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Okay, so I am the president of Smiley's Voice Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization in South Florida. And our mission is to increase our community's awareness of stroke and its impact, prevention, treatment, identifying the risk factors, and our organization was founded in 2010. So at that point, stroke was the third leading cause of death, and now it's the fifth leading cause of death. So I can say, of course, there's been
Some
major
help.
progress. There's been some
Yes.
progress, and I think that small organizations like ourselves have actually helped in terms of the educating that we have done, the education that we've done in the community with supporters like Memorial Healthcare System and their physicians, Dr. Jiboye, Dr. Meta, so many that I can't even begin to tell you. The health screenings that we've done throughout the years, we do that in the different settings that I stated before, educating in the schools, the screenings for the risk factors, the high blood pressure, cholesterol, all free screenings that we've done throughout the year with, again, support of these health systems, Baptist Health South, Memorial, Florida Medical Center. I think that we've been blessed to have such support so that we can make this impact. Also, part of our mission is to support education, and we give scholarships to nursing and medical students. We've done about 18 or so since our inception, both in South Florida as well as in Jamaica. And we also provide financial assistance to stroke victims or the survivors if they need assistance with maybe uh, insurance payment. Sometimes when the younger people have a stroke, they don't have the ability to work. So they may be at a loss for paying for the insurance premiums. We can fill that gap. We have done so. They may need equipment. They may not have coverage. We have filled that gap. So these are the things that we're proud of that we have been doing in the community. When somebody can call us and say, hey, my husband is having a major headache, what should I do? Where should he go? When they tell us that they've come to our events and they've learned a lot, it makes us feel good that we're actually living our mission. So those are some of the things that we do as Smiley's Voice Foundation.
And your turn, Dr. Ajiboye, to reintroduce yourself.
Dr. Ajiboye. I'm a neuroendovascular surgeon by training. I did my training at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia and my advanced training at Texas Stroke Institute in Dallas, Texas. I work at the Memorial Healthcare System at Regional and West, and I help in the management of patients with stroke. So all the way from medical therapy to minimally invasive surgical intervention. I'm always excited to take care of patients with strokes and give them the possibility for them to have a full recovery. And but my work is not just restricted to just within the hospital. I also get to go out in the community and educate the community in terms of how to identify stroke through the FAST acronym. And I also work with the EMS in terms of educating them so that they can, alert us to stroke alerts right from the field and allow us to be ready just in time. Because time is brain. Every minute that passes, about 1.9 million brain cells become damaged, and they are irreversibly damaged. And once that time to present into the hospital can mean the difference between complete recovery, significant disability, as well as death. So I really appreciate what Carol Hilton does in terms of allowing the community to be educated. And I also appreciate Commissioner Winston for allowing me to be part of this platform to communicate with you guys in Miramar.
You're welcome, Dr. Ajiboye. One of the things questions I like to ask Carol, and I'm asking you because you've been in this for such a time. Have you seen a change in attitude where strokes are concerned, if only where people are more aware of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, people call us from time to time. They're having a headache. I'm afraid I might get a stroke. I'm, I'm listening to the education that you've done over the radio or in person. So I think there's a problem. What about my hemoglobin A1C? I'm concerned because I know I'm at risk for a stroke if it's high. So I actually see people and hear people calling us and asking advice early on when they
Okay.
begin to show the sign. What about my blood pressure? What should I do? I was prescribed this. Should I take it? Should I not? What about herbals? And I think it's important, and maybe Dr. Jiboye want to talk about the herbals, that treatments that's out there that, for high blood pressure, and some people try to, go in the herbal way instead of the traditional way. I don't know, there's an interaction between herbs sometimes in the prescribed meds. I don't know if it's always a good idea to take them both, or at least you should notify the physician if you're doing herbal treatments in conjunction with the prescribed meds, because a lot of our people in our community sometimes either don't want to take the prescribed meds and decide that they're going to rely 100% on herbs. I don't know what your take is on that, Dr. Jiboye.
So, first of all, I'll address the issue about the community being more aware of stroke. I recently moved from Texas to Florida, and even though certainly the incidence of stroke is higher in the community here because of the South Florida and the retirement communities, so we have a lot more elderly. But one thing I've noticed is that people are more aware of strokes thanks to what you guys do in terms of educating them. And the way you can tell is this: we rarely see strokes in which a lot of the infarct has been completed. A lot of the strokes we see coming early. And compared to when I was in Texas, we also had some rural areas where we had to transport patients all the way from other hospitals to our main hospital. But there we saw a lot more completed infarcts in which there's nothing we can do. Here, it's very, very rare. So certainly what you guys are doing in this community is working, and just keep doing it. So I appreciate that effort. Now addressing the issue of herbs, I'm not, usually what I tell patients is this: stick to the medications that have been shown to work. A lot of these trials, like aspirin, Plavix, TPA, thrombectomy, these are trials that were called double-blinded and randomized, meaning that people were put in one situation where they didn't get that treatment, and people were put in the other situation where they got the treatment, and they found that getting that treatment, patients did much better. So it's already gone through the rigorous vetting by the FDA, by the research committees. Those have been proven to work. So if anytime you think about using herbs, certainly talk to your doctor, but herbs should not, in my mind, should not be a replacement for truly verified medications and procedures that have been shown to work.
Okay, let me intercede here and explain, if ask for more explanation, Dr. Ajiboye. We come out of these traditions that rely to a certain extent on the natural preparations. And one of the things that has been explained to me, and I've tried to share with a number of people, is that when you have a pharmaceutical product, what you have is not only something that has been through the rigorous R&R process, but something that has specific measures and balances. So what you have is a particular size, which has a particular component of whatever substances and so on is. When you come to the natural preparations, what kind of standards do you have? What kind of measurements do you have? Do you use a handful of this particular bush? Do you use a certain number of drops of this juice? And I think this is part of what we have to get home to our people, that, hey, we're not saying that they're not efficacious, but how do you manage and control the dosage?
And you really can.
I think that is what I think we need to explain to our people who are kind of locked into and it has changed over time.
Yes.
Because so many of the large pharmaceutical companies have gone the natural herbal way as well. But the standardization that exists in that area still hasn't caught up with the pharmaceuticals. And I think that is one of the pieces of information we have to share with our community. Yes, we come from that tradition, but why this is different? Because I like to tell people, and Jamaicans would understand the terminology, and I'm sure that Dr. Jiboye, when we talk about the magic that penicillin has been, I like to tell people that penicillin really came from what we in Jamaica call jonjo. It's from a fungus. So it is not far-fetched to think that a natural entity can be of benefit. But when you start running into problems is when when you don't know what kind of dosage works under what circumstance.
Exactly.
So I mean, honestly, the best way to do that, we got to put those things in trials, right? But
Ah,
which pharmaceutical company will help with that, because I mean a lot of the medications and a lot of the medications come from, they've got some natural components to them,
exactly.
and they also certainly have their side effects. And but then the question is, as you said, how do you know how much dosing do you take? What's the appropriate dosing? How do you know if you take too much and then you're at risk of bleeding instead of it working to reduce you from having a stroke? Those are things that you have to put in a research study. I'm sure people have used it and they've tried it, but we don't know, is it causing some kind of damage to certain other parts of the body? So those are difficult questions. But when you come into a situation where there's a lot of gray zone, then you got to go to something that's been tried, that's been verified, that you can trust. And those are some of these medications that we use that's been shown to reduce the risk of stroke.
Mhm.
Which then, Doc, brings us to the matter of vaccines for the coronavirus. What is your advice for your patients?
So for vaccinations, I certainly recommend them having the vaccines. I got the vaccine myself, the Pfizer. I know the Pfizer and the Moderna have been proven to work with minimal side effects. I was actually reading something, I think it was yesterday, saying the AstraZeneca one increases the risk of stroke. And I know, and I think that's also the one that's related to increased risk of blood clots. So my recommendation is, if you can just stay with Pfizer, Moderna, that would be my recommendation. Certainly get it; it's protective. Um, and the question then is, how about in kids? And I think it's approved for kids as young as 12.
Oh,
Well, we've heard
yes.
that, yeah.
Yes. So yeah, it's a simple recommendation. I think go ahead and get it. The side effects are pretty minimal, even though it seems like we developed the vaccine so quickly. It's not that the process was rushed. I mean, it still went through the vigorous vetting process. It was just that a lot of the red tape got taken away, and enough money was made available for them to be able to do their study pretty quickly. The other thing is, there's still probably long-term effects, like 1 2 year out, that we don't know what those side effects are. And so those are things that we'll see, as time goes by. But I think the short answer to your question is certainly I recommend it, because I think it helps to protect you from COVID. COVID is not, it's not a good thing. As COVID actually attacks the blood vessels. So if you remember me
Okay.
talking about the pipes and then
Uh-huh.
causing rust, COVID can actually attack the wall of the pipe and cause it to develop rust. That's why, that 42-year-old patient that I saw, she had COVID. A lot of some of the significantly bad or significant strokes I've taken care of are patients with COVID, and you can literally see clots forming. I've seen two, there's a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that were recently at Memorial over the last 2 months that came in with clots in the brain that also had COVID, the MIS syndrome. So I think it's important that we certainly, if there's an option to help reduce your risk of COVID, like taking the vaccination, I think it should be taken.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I think that is so needed in our community because a large number of people in our community are still hesitant to taking the vaccine, and they're still waiting for a year out or so. And that puts us at risk. Mm.
I've developed a number of theories in this during this pandemic. People will claim, for example, that it is an experimental drug. And Doc, you don't have to agree with me, and Carol, you don't have to agree with me. But my response to that is this: all medication are experimental. You don't know if it's going to work because a medication that is tried on this patient might not be good for another patient. So in
Exactly.
that sense, it is experimental as well. And I,
And
I want to think I have an appreciation of science. So I'm sorry, I'm going along with the scientists.
oh, absolutely. I had my vaccine. I had the Pfizer. My entire family was vaccinated because we understand the risks and what COVID does.
And what I'm learning here from Dr. Ajiboye is as well is how, without us even thinking of it, because we don't know, is the possible link between the whole stroke condition and COVID because it goes after the blood vessels.
Absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
we've learned nothing else today, this is one of the major takeaways that we have from this
Absolutely.
discussion today. That
Absolutely.
the stroke happens in the blood vessels, and here comes Mr. COVID wanting to attack the blood vessels as well.
Exactly. Yep.
We've covered a lot of really incredible ground, and I want us to start reviewing some of the things we've talked, because the value of doing this is not that people necessarily join us live. Some people join us and not comment or respond, but the value lies in the fact that we repeat programs like this on the Miramar cable channel from time to time. So its value continues even after we close in a few minutes from now. And I think that is one of the major reasons why I want to tell you both so much thanks for spending the time, and especially Dr. Ajiboye, who is actually on duty as we do this. But I also think that enhanced our chat this evening, because here he is in the midst of an institution that's dealing with all of these things.
Yeah. 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 Dr. Jibo, you want to talk about hypertension a little bit more since that's so prevalent in our community and that's the silent killer?
I will actually. So hypertension is the number one modifiable risk factors. So, stroke is this bad wolf that destroys lives. The silver lining is the risk factors that we can control. 80% of them are preventable. And if you want, hey, which one should I select? As I said, hypertension is the number one. And the way I think of high blood pressure is this. Think about it. Remember that pipe? If you should increase the pressure of the water within that pipe, it can potentially rupture the pipe, right?
Pressure.
Or what happens
Right.
is as that water goes at a high speed against the wall of the pipe, rust and plaques develop. So that's the same thing that happens with high blood pressure. If your blood pressure is supposed to be like less than one, ideally 110, 120 over 80. That's so every time your heart beats, that initial lub, it sends out the pressure of 110. And then when it beats the second time, the pressure of 180. So if your blood pressure is consistently in the 160s or 170, as soon as it's actually per the guidelines, if it's above 130 over 90, that's high blood pressure. So if it's hitting that blood vessel wall at such a high pressure, there are two things that can happen over time. Number one, as it hits that blood vessel thickens. It's the
To
reaction of the blood
respond.
vessel. It's like I
Uh-huh.
want to be
Okay.
firm so that I don't so I don't get blown out. It thickens, and as that blood vessel thickens, then that reduces the blood that's going to the brain that's supposed to supply nutrients and oxygen. So that's why it's important to have that blood pressure below, ideally around 110, 120 over 80. So if there's any way you can reduce your blood pressure, it's really important to do that. The beauty of exercise is this. Exercise trains the heart to become more efficient. And when the heart becomes more efficient, over time, the heart doesn't have to work as hard, and that would lower your blood pressure as well. If exercise doesn't do that, then you have to take medications and make sure you're compliant. You take your medications as you're supposed to. The other thing also is this. If let's say you're taking uh, food that's rich in cholesterol or fatty foods. So in addition to the blood pressure, that high blood pressure beating against the wall of the vessel, making it thick, you're also having the plaques from cholesterol. And if you have diabetes, the sugar also all sticking to the wall, just progressively narrowing your blood vessel and reducing the important nutrients and oxygen to the brain. So hypertension is key, and the key is to reduce it. Exercise, diet, and certainly taking the medications as prescribed by your doctor.
Mhm.
One of the challenges that our community and similar communities have had over time is that we ate in a different fashion where we came from.
Mhm.
Um, I remember specialists explaining to me, for example, that a lot of us were never in the habit of eating these big chunks of meat. Here we come in relative terms. The meat is cheap, so we've dived into it. Are we talking here, Doc? And this is just speculation on my part. Are we talking here about our systems, for example, being more used to a vegetable, fruit-oriented diet, having to now cope with meat? Does that create challenges for our bodies?
That I mean that could be true. I mean, I grew up in Nigeria, and in Nigeria where I grew up, we had a farm. We ate a lot of things from the ground. So I think also, I mean, a big part of it, I think our body are created to be more of those kind of eat from the ground as opposed to less of this processed, processed food. They're not good for the body at all. And
Mhm.
they're usually the things that are cheaper.
And
And the
they're
things that are
convenient.
what's that?
They're
Cheap and
convenient.
convenient.
Whereas the healthy stuff like this, the ground are the ones that are expensive, and that's what we need. That's what is healthy for us.
Right.
So I think I mean, I don't think it's just unique to just us. I think in general,
Mhm.
if you look back at the ancestors, the original people, way back, uh, centuries ago, they used to be hunters and gatherers, mostly,
Yep.
natural things. And over time, we kind of evolved to eating more animals, and then over time to eating processed. Those processed food are the worst than the animals. Plant
I-
based is always ideal if you
what one of the silver linings that has come out of the pandemic for me on a very personal, although public level, is the fact that contributions of food continue to be made to communities. And when
Mhm.
I get off this chat, I'm going to actually deliver food to two separate addresses, no, really three separate addresses. And I've seen happening, and my wife takes care of that whole collection and distribution through our church and so on. And one of the things I have noticed is the amount of vegetables that are offered by these different agencies and associations that are gifting to members of the community. And I want to hope that this is also a good sign of what is to come for our community because we've been eating more of this kind of food.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if the pandemic has caused anything else, I'm thinking the fact that there's so much food that people are not actually paying out of their pockets for, people are beginning to get creative and adventurous in preparing some of these meals that have come to us, and not a lot of it is meat.
Yeah. That's awesome. I've seen that.
So listen, before we run out of time, I just want you guys to repeat what I consider the major takeaways from this little chat. Dr. Ajiboye, talk if you would. I like the technological side of it. Talk about the process where you're actually going into someone's blood vessels and knocking that stroke away. Talk about that for a minute.
You want me to talk about the technical part?
I- I'm forgetting the particular terminology that is used to it.
The thrombectomy.
Thrombectomy?
Thrombectomies, right? Yes.
You want the technical part?
Oh, just tell us the fact that that exists and it never existed once and how helpful it is.
Oh, okay. So yes, so the thing is that the most important thing is time is brain. Get to the hospital fast because any treatment that you need to get, you want to get it in a timely fashion so that it can actually work to further reduce any more brain damage. Um, Back in the 1990s, we developed a medication called IVTPA, which is a clot busting medication that works for small strokes. It doesn't work for strokes that are in large vessels because those cannot be lysed. So what we need is something called a thrombectomy. You can basically get into that vessel in the brain from the vessel in the leg or the vessel in the hand. You get there by catheters and wires, and basically like a plumber. The plumber comes in, they have the rotor, they put it in the pipe. We do the same thing. We just get our catheter and what we call a stent retriever. We get them all through the leg, all through the abdomen, all through the heart, and then all the way up through the neck, and then into the brain. And we park it where we see the clot. and we try and snatch the clot and pull it all the way down. And then once that's pulled out, we then do another run. And a lot of times, usually more than 90% of the time, the blood vessels are open. That is called a thrombectomy. And that has to be done within 24 hours, because the further you wait before doing that, the less likelihood that that's going to work. The clot is already hardened. It's hard to pull it out, or you already have a big stroke, and opening it out can just cause you to bleed into that stroke. So that is what we call the thrombectomy. If there's any three things that I want the audience to learn from today's, communication are: number one, know how to identify a stroke fast. Facial weakness, arm weakness, speech difficulty, time to call 911. Time is brain. Every minute that passes, 1.9 million brain cells die. Number two, stroke is a bad thing, but guess what? The silver lining, 80% are preventable. And one of those things that's preventable is high blood pressure. And how can you prevent it? Exercise, eat healthy, visit your doctor, and take your medications. And then number three, COVID can increase your risk of stroke because it attacks the blood vessels. So make sure you go out there and take your vaccination if it's offered.
I don't know
Thank
how
you.
we're going to. No, I thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. And
No,
Carl, your
thank you
final
for giving
comments.
me the opportunity.
You're most
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you so much, Winston.
Your final comments, Carol, quickly.
Well, again, thanks to Dr. Jiboye and Memorial Healthcare System for the support that they've given to us throughout the years. And we just could not do it without them. My family or board members, the community in a whole, the financial support that they have, donated to us so that we can continue to do this mission. And Smiley's Voice Foundation will be heard near and far, making a difference in the lives of many through stroke awareness and education program, impacting lives in a positive way, one person at a time.
Listen, there's no way I can say enough thanks to both of you, Dr. Norman Ajiboye and Specialist Nurse Carol Hilton. I thank you so much for making this contribution to this engagement on Facebook Live this evening. And as I said, the great value that I am convinced resides in this kind of presentation is that it gets repeated on our cable channel. So the information will be relayed to different audiences at different times. I thank you so much. And I also thank our staff at the City of Miramar. Thanks to our producer, director, manager, agitator, Lorna, and for making this possible and making it possible the way it takes place every time. I thank you guys so much, and I hope our residents, our audience, our viewers, our watchers have learned something special this evening as we help to contribute to Stroke Awareness Month 2021. I thank you all for participating.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Barnes, and thank you, Carol Hilton. We truly, truly appreciate all you do. Dr. Mehta spoke highly of you, Ms. Carol Hilton, and how you're raising stroke awareness.
Yeah.
I know what happened to your son was tragic, but you were able to use that to save a lot of other countless lives. And that is truly, truly appreciated. We cannot do what we do without you guys, without the community being educated. So thank you. There's a
so
lot
much,
of
guys.
blessings in there. Thank you.
We're blessed. Thank you. Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Carol. And thanks a million again, everyone who was involved in our presentation today and who made it possible.
Okay. Bye-bye.